Did anybody get the sort of catch of my title of my presentation? The @ sign, but okay, so 2 in 1. So what I'm meaning by this is my presentation is about using Maltego to visualize and process evidence. Two different things. We have Maltego as a presentation tool and to visualize things, to make the absorption rate easier, and we have evidence. At the end of the day, more than likely, if you go to court, you're going to take both with you. And for this purpose, we need to understand the human brain. It processes images in 13 milliseconds, which is 60,000 times faster than text. What it sees, it retains as memory 80% of the time. What it reads retains only 20% of the time, and what it hears at 10% of the time. So that magnificent organ that we all have, our brains, has limitations, but it has some really, really powerful stuff. And I think people that invent tools like Maltego are able to exploit that and assist us in our work as we go through our sort of security research or investigation, cyber intelligence, infosec, whatever you're involved with. So today's presentation goes around that, is Maltego reasoning evidence with visualization, making sense of it all. Instead of using pin-up boards that they used to use in the old days, such as this, and pieces of string, it is a lot more easier to do in a tool like Maltego. And to give you an idea, this is one area where when I was learning to use Maltego, is how to discover evidence, or let's put it this way, information that leads to evidence with using a basic thing like a URL entity in Maltego, and with that we use IBM Watson to extract other entities for us to be able to identify things, and this happens so quickly and it's really great. So in this case, this is all about people, individuals that have been sanctioned in South Africa for belonging to ISIS, and the person of concern here is Fahad Huma, and in this case you can see me, there were different entities that came back that were relevant to him, is putting those together and then using the organic layout, which gives us a different perspective of this, and then using the descent layout gives us an idea of how he fits into that with locations, and using the ball by weight layout gives us a different idea. And this really facilitates analysis for us to be able to present it easier and quicker. I think that's the crucial thing, that we can present evidence a lot quicker at the end of the day. But this is just great because suddenly now other people have got bigger bubble size because of the weighting, and that assists us to make quicker decisions, and most importantly, as the Americans call it, to pivot off and go and find out more information. For instance, such as this Natasha Kara, who is she, why is she relevant to this investigation, and why would we want to know more about her? And I often use this example when I'm teaching in intelligence, is that man that comes out of a bar at night and he's standing in the street looking away, searching on the ground, wondering, and he keeps on searching. Eventually a policeman comes walking along and he says to him, and he's a really nice policeman, he really wants to help him. So he says, "Sir, what are you doing?" So he says, "No, I'm looking for my car keys." And the policeman says, "Can I help you?" And he says, "Yeah, for sure." So they're searching away, and then after a while the policeman says to him, "Sir, where's your car parked?" And he says, "No, up there in that car park further up, which is pretty dark, you see." And the policeman says, "But why are you searching here?" And he says, "No, because there's more light here." It illustrates that our problem with seeking out data and information and evidence can often be hidden from us purely because we're not looking in the right places. And that goes for, because primarily our work entails data that we find and discover on the internet, and this is always the problem with cyber intelligence or OSINT, open source intelligence, is that what is it that we don't know? And that's always the tricky question. You know, it's difficult if a client says to you, oh, you didn't find information about this. No, we didn't. But you can't sit back and say, well, there is no information about that. That's a tough call. You're going to have to find affirmation that in fact supports your theory. So going to another example was at the time of the Brussels bombings, and I know hindsight, they always say hindsight's a perfect science, or an almost perfect science. But what we did is we constructed a graph out of the suspects, out of the network that were all part of the network responsible for the bombings, and we set out to see, was there any chance there would have been a warning to intelligence prior to it, whether they could have stopped this. Anyway, we put the whole network together, who connected to who, families and friends in other parts of the world, other previous arrests and how they connected back to this. But nonetheless, this gave us a great visualization. I just want to stop it here. We found during the course of that research 2 Interpol wanted notices for Abrini, the brothers that were involved with Abrini and Najim Lakauri, the Bakauri brothers. And what has happened in the interim is that Interpol have obviously removed those 2 images from their website, so the URLs are now dead. Very similarly to when we use a website, and in this case the BBC, and we extract all the images down by using Maltego to do that for us, which the discovery process is so much faster and so much higher, and it enables us to find parts of an investigation where we must take it further. But again, if any of these images are deleted, they're gone, and especially if you've saved your graph. But here we have a saving grace. We use the Wayback Machine, and here we just go into the Wayback Machine, which is a transform within Maltego and allows us to recover those images. And there we go. We've got the images, and it allows, now we know what we're looking at. The one image, unfortunately, has gone altogether. It's been deleted. And the other one is there of the one brother, and it confirms that it was there. But the issue here is the 2 URLs. And they both have date stamps, or year stamps at least. And they were both wanted people at least a year before the explosions happened. And had they been under surveillance, and this vital piece of intelligence was known, which I'm sure it was probably just a disconnect between surveillance and actually using that information to be able to possibly prevent these attacks. Anyway, our journey into Maltego dates back to approximately 2009-2010, when myself and my colleagues were about to start a rock band and enter the world of sex, drugs and rock and roll, and we were saved by Maltego. We can only be incredibly grateful for that, and our journey of research and online investigations has taken quite a different course. And we've gone through many versions of Maltego. I've used the lyric, "The sun is the same." It comes from a song by Pink Floyd, Time. And the only thing that has changed over the years is more working bits to the tool, but the tool in itself hasn't changed, and the logo's changed, and the versions changed. We used from version 2, I think it was, and we went through radium, and we went through chlorine. So we've really been through the processes of Maltego and have nothing but fun with it. Helped us to teach other people how to use the tool, and it's changed their way of approaching investigations. But the biggest thing and the most vital thing about it was we took the original tool because it was designed for the InfoSec world. And yes, I've used i2 and various other tools, free and paid. They don't have quite the same bits and pieces that can really make this thing cook on gas and fire off and make things easier for the analysis process. So we originally were really taking a rope and shoving it through the eye of a needle and making the tool do things that it wasn't altogether designed to do. Which brings me to our next graph, and this was all kicked off by a syndicate that was robbing and blackmailing clients of prostitutes in South Africa. And this is a mock-up of that investigation. We use this particular and the data as a mock-up because it's all fictitious, none of it is real. But the point of the whole operation was to identify syndicate members, because the prostitutes would either drug the clients, and the syndicate members, once the client had fallen asleep due to whatever drug they took, the syndicate members would come into the hotel room. Primarily it was people staying in hotels, and they would rob the client of his money and goods and whatever he had with him. The other side of this particular crime was the prostitutes would hand over the information of the client to the syndicate members, and they would then masquerade or pretend to be policemen and then phone up the client and say to them, well, this person that you spent the night with is now laid a rape charge against you, and you need to come now. We have a warrant of your arrest. So it's all that. It's a classic social engineering attack, and you need to come down to the police station. But if you do come down to the police station, understand one thing, that you could face arrest. And of course now the person is panicking, and most of these people, or a good proportion of them, are married. So they're frightened that this information will get back to their spouses. And obviously the person on the other side of the phone would say, well, if you paid us $10,000, we'll make this thing go away. And that's inevitably what happened. So we were given all this information from cell phone records, date of calls, the activity, was it messaging? There was no WhatsApp in those days. Receiving calls, making calls, and we geolocated. We narrowed them down to particular areas. We slowly but surely started to identify these people, and Maltego played a very critical role in that. It brings me back to 2-in-1, when we faced with appearing in court. 2-in-1, while I set out in this discussion to say to you, we effectively need two containers or two processes or two elements to what we're doing. So Maltego on the one hand to process and present evidence, and evidence itself to support what we are saying. At the same time, we need to understand that the forensic burden is two or more pieces of independent information of each other. In other words, a suspect seen with his vehicle on CCTV driving past, that CCTV recording is obtained, and then say, for instance, the person, say you went to visit somebody, and that person gives us a statement confirming the suspect did visit them on such and such a date, and the reasons for the visit and a certain activity took place, gives us those two independent facts, two pieces of information to present us our fact. That's the forensic burden or the forensic standard, generally speaking. However, even in the corporate world, or if we're doing due diligence, if we're doing intelligence gathering, my proposal is that we should always utilize that forensic standard. Let's have some port, because there's nothing worse, even doing a due diligence or a intelligence operation, and we've got shaky information. It can be used in different environments, like a tactical environment. I do understand that, until we expand on that a bit more, and the intelligence gathering process reverts from a sort of tactical thing into an operational intelligence project, then the whole burden will change, obviously. But still, I think it's a crucial barrier line for us to, or measurement for us to follow, to be able to process information that we have. Because fundamentally, at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is make decisions. What is the decision? The decision needs to go one way or another. Whether we're doing that in the corporate world, business world, intelligence operations, or in court, it's always back down to the ultimate goal of making a decision. And on that basis, some of my favorite transforms are local transforms, and here what we have is Holy, which is an email search tool of social media platforms, and Magri that searches the username. So it's installed locally, runs as a local transform. In this case, it finds a couple of social media platforms where that email address is registered, And then we do the same process with Magri to look up usernames to give us potential platforms where the username has been used. And in this case, we've got two that link to each other. That's Pinterest and potentially, and I say potentially, these could be the same person. So there we go. You link those up. At least it's now an angle of further investigation. But the bottom line is, even though we've got this information, we've got it very rapidly, we've still got to go out there and find it. Because both Holy and Magri went to the platform, said to us, yes, that email address is registered there, but we must go there, find the exact account. Otherwise, this doesn't mean a thing. It could be full of errors. Brings me to the next aspect of Christopher Panayati, who was charged in South Africa for murdering his wife. Well, he hired assassins to murder his wife, and he was subsequently convicted of that. But during the trial, there was a police officer testifying, Warrant Officer Sean Kuhn, who during his testimony said, he was asked, how did you identify one of the accomplices? And he said he took the cell phone number of that person. He'd obviously picked it up from cell phone records or somewhere, and he put it into Facebook. And I think some of you will remember in those days, way back then, it's only, 6 years ago, you could reverse search cell phone numbers and it'll point to an account. That obviously is gone now. Can't do that anymore. And Sean Kuhn had done that. And the defense advocate jumped up, defense lawyer jumped up, Advocate Daberman, and he objected profusely, saying this was trial by Facebook, trial by Google. And he was correct, because Sean Kuhn could not explain how he could locate a person or identify a person by putting their number into Facebook, and how that then transacted back to that particular Facebook account, hence identifying them. Because the correct procedure from there would have been to subpoena Facebook and confirm that from the server data. However, the objection was thrown out by the judge because they already had evidence linking that number to the suspect at the end of the day. So Daberman's objection, while being correct, wasn't upheld, so he lost it. Another example I want to show you is making use of OpenCNAM. I've been using OpenCNAM for many, many years to look up telephone numbers, to identify people, and it's really great. It's fast, it's rough, it gives us an indicator, particularly if we're busy with an intelligence operation, and we can identify a person from a number. And then using the IPSQ transform, we can get the service provider. So within, and that's why I've put this on repeat, is because it goes so quickly, that if we're in a critical phase of investigation, have to identify a person. This is one way this can do it. And the second thing is by using the score, identifies the service provider and identifies where it is. It gives us those tags. If we need to issue a subpoena or a court order or obtain a court order, at least we know who to serve that on now, because there it is. And then we can get our evidence to support what we have found through this particular transform, making life considerably easier for us. In our country, and you've probably all heard about it, we have and many other African countries have a prolific rate of wildlife poaching and wildlife product trafficking, which takes place. And for years I was involved with assisting with intelligence for the authorities to identify the poachers, the couriers, and the syndicate members, and primarily syndicates that came out of Asia or were based in Asia. We used Maltego to map them all out, and over time, as we did more and more intelligence gathering, to build up the profile of the syndicate, and particularly of the poachers on the ground. Who were the poachers connected? Because the poachers don't move product themselves to international destinations. And they would do the poaching what we would call the level 1, level 2s. Here you can see we're slowly putting the syndicate together, different people and how they link together using different layouts, then gave us a clue of who was more connected than other people. So the poachers would take the wildlife products to the syndicate members. Syndicate members in turn had access to overseas international markets. They would then arrange for couriers and smuggle the wildlife product out of the country to wherever it was going. But at the same time, we were also tasked to analyze various crime scenes involving the poaching of rhino. In this particular case, all this information is fictitious, but it gives you an idea. It's based on the actual events. I just left out crucial information here. And what we did is took a series of crime scenes, put them together, and this was in one area, used the dates, then geolocated them. So we would geolocate them down to here and start to put things together. Like for instance, so over here we've got the tracks, the vehicle tracks, we've got a cartridge, and we've got a bullet point extracted from the carcass of the animal. Over time, you start finding the same cartridges, the same bullet points across various crime scenes. You start to find the same vehicle tracks. You might find footprints depending how long how old the scene was, and slowly but surely we would put that all together for to build up the case. This is really based on what is known as forensic intelligence, a science that seems to have lost a little bit of momentum. So it's very similar to that. And then ultimately, when the suspects are arrested, this builds up to providing that information to identify them, and then when they're arrested, to obtain the rifles and the guns used in those attacks. And forensically, the ballistics would link them back to the crime scene and to the gun. Which brings us to the final sort of 2-in-1 scenario, and that is Hunchley. Developed by Justin Seitz, very nice guy. And we'd been talking at the time, I was a beta tester on Hunchley as well, and there was a lot of discussion going around how could we incorporate Hunchley data into Maltego, because when you've got a big investigation, you could get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of information and data that you need to process. And those of you who don't know Hunchley, here's an example of the front page or the main investigation page, which gives you the pages that you viewed and collected and stored and secured, how many images you collected, selectors that you've kept, such as names, places, email addresses, telephone numbers, etc., etc. All your notes can all be collected in this investigation dashboard. And going back to my previous example of the crime scene investigation, some of the images that were collected at these crime scenes we took back because you can attach them into Hunchley as well, which was really, really great. So you could just keep everything in one place. So this is kind of a dossier for you to perform your investigation. So Justin then wrote a local transform, incorporated into Maltego, and in this example I'm going to show you, based on that investigation we've just shown you, that's a demonstration case all about a guy by the name of Paul LaRue. Go and look him up, and for instance you would pull back all the pages, so it'll give you the pages kept in your dossier, and those will come back to you in Maltego. Then from there, each of those pages you can investigate further. There's other transforms that run with those, but in this case I'm just going to pull back the images that we collected during the investigation, select them all, convert them to Hunchley images, and then Hunchley is really great at collecting metadata and EXIF data. Bring the EXIF data back into Maltego that it's there for us to have a look at. And then one last step, and this, just to give you an example, we converted those Hunchley images to Maltego images to do a last EXIF data extraction from them, such as this. So select them all, just change them to images, and then use the EXIF transform that is in Maltego. We must also accept that not every single image out there has EXIF data. In this case, we've got some geolocation, and we've got models of devices that actually took the images. All this can add up at the end of the day when it comes to identification. And here we're just extracting the location from those geo coordinates. So just before I close, I just want to remain with the whole theory in that our intelligence gathering and investigations and research is often similar to a puzzle, which when we're doing puzzles at home, we have the lid to guide us to know what that puzzle eventually is going to look like. But in research, intelligence gathering investigations, we don't have that lid. We've got a whole bunch of pieces, and we don't know which pieces we can discard, and we don't know how many more other pieces we haven't quite found yet. And the one thing that Multigo does for us, it provides us with that lid to be able to forward our investigation to something, to an objective that we're able to present to an audience, be that a court, a boardroom, whatever the case may be, as to what data evidence has been discovered that is supported and presented to them. So in closing, I want to leave you with a quote by Naomi Weinstein, who was a psychologist and neuroscientist, and she also followed the 2-in-1 theory in saying that evidence and reason, my heroes and my guides. Thank you.